Hi, welcome to the stream. It's going to be a short stream today because I have a lot of stuff that's not going to be so interesting to watch. I have to come up with a pitch and put together a PowerPoint deck, which I've already started today, but I kind of want to do that off the stream and do some actual development work on the stream. So, to that end, it's going to be a little bit of shorter stream just because I really have to focus on that stuff, but I want to make sure to stay consistent and stream every day at around 3 o'clock. So, why is it not going? Why, according to Twitch, I'm not streaming yet, which is weird. Gotta make sure. Okay, just had to refresh. Alright, so, if you're just tuning in, I made a lot of good progress on the game over the weekend, so let me go ahead and just show you what the game's doing right now. So I'm going to hit play here, and starts off as a super hot planet. I added this sort of dry, cracked rock texture to the planet, so it kind of looks like it should really, instead of just like a smooth surface. You get this kind of nasty rock. I also made it so the volcanoes can kind of move a little bit as they grow. I'm not super happy with that yet, but what I really wanted to do is make sure I don't always get this little like 5 or 6 prong star pattern everywhere. So I thought if I make it move a little bit, it'll break it up, which it does, although I think I could do a little better job of it. But we got our volcanic planet going on here, and pretty soon it cools enough that all the evaporated water will rain back down, and we got our clouds. I fixed an issue with the cloud texturing, so now no matter even if you're looking at the poles, that the textures still look good and smooth. And volcanoes are still going. We got clouds, I think pretty nice looking clouds all around. I'm gonna go ahead and create some terrain here. And as you can see, it's still that kind of volcanic rock, but it's getting some moisture from those clouds that's raining, so you get some life growing, and it starts in between the and eventually goes to fill the whole island. Now, it should also get away from that volcanic thing eventually as the land gets a little more moist, but gotta work on that a little bit more. And you can see the lava there. I did a lot of improvements to lava. Also, I don't think I had the green vegetation growing on stuff. It's not exactly where I want to be, but it's sort of a start for life appearing on the planet. Basically, if the temperature is in a certain range, and like this volcano is like protruding, trying to get above the surface, but seemingly failing. You see the volcanoes are creating these rings of moisture around them as they evaporate the ocean below. And you can see how the lava has that nice sort of like, as it dries, it leaves that cracked lava look. I think it's a big improvement on the look of the lava. I did some work trying to get some like air pressure stuff and wind generated from that, but I was running into some problems. So what I thought I would do today on the stream is just do a little bit of fake wind to just for the prototype's sake and for demo's sake, since I need to hopefully show this to some potential publishers, or at least make a video of it. But just before I do that, I just want to throw a little bit of lava on here, and you can see what the lava looks like. That's like a really fine detail lava. Let me make it a little fatter, and you can see at the edges it kind of breaks apart nicely, and as it cools it'll kind of break apart more and more, and you've got the clouds flowing over it. And you can see it changed the landscape before it to have more of that cracked earth look and killed all the other life around it. So that's sort of a brief summary of what has changed over the weekend. So now, if we look at the code, I have this 2 spots right here that are disabled right now. One is wind and one is air pressure, and the air pressure creates the wind, so this is listed kind of backwards, but basically every point on the planet has air pressure, which I can actually show you if I go to the camera, and then I have this tool that I made, where like right now it's actually having an arrow that's supposed to show wind velocity, but right now it's all 0, so it kind of just points straight up from the planet. If I enable, let's say, just the air pressure stuff, it's supposed to affect the wind velocity, and you can see, but it's like, it's not really generating the results you'd expect. Like, it should be pointing pretty much away from those volcanoes, but it kind of goes in different directions. So I want to disable that for now. And what did I do? To regain my thought. So that's what it was doing. So what I need to do is just do a quick hack. And what I did some research for this game, looking up info about trade winds, how it works on Earth. If you look up trade winds, you'll get these little maps of like how. Well, that's not what I wanted. That's some kind of brand. So let me not do images. How trade winds work. And this is a pretty good image here. If I can zoom in on that. Or this one too. Where basically they have this clockwise kind of motion here. And, that should be counterclockwise. Actually, that's kind of a... Let's go back and look at that other image. This one right here. So, you basically get these different cycles at different levels within the planet. So here, like, you get these counterclockwise spins that gives us hurricanes in the Atlantic, and then you have clockwise in the southern hemisphere, and then it kind of keeps alternating. And so there are sort of 6 bands. You've got your polar cell, your midlateral, and your Hadley cells are basically your tropical cells. So what I'm going to do is sort of just hack it and like essentially hard code that into the game so you have some wind that can hopefully blow the rain around. And how I'm going to do that is I'm going to create an image and map that to the surface of the globe. And the image, instead of treating it just like color data, I'm going to treat it as vector data, as sort of X and Y magnitudes of the wind vectors. So if we go to Photoshop, oh, by the way, that's my business card there. I got some feedback from folks. One of them was nice enough to put together sort of this version, and then I added just the tagline "Indie Game Studio." I thought that was good because it was descriptive, but not like blustery or, just humble. And Indie Game Studio, not overwrought or anything, not over the top. So I'm going to create a new image for the purposes of this. I think I'll create it 1024 by 20. Let's make it low res. It doesn't need to be that high res, so I'll make it 1024 and 512 because it's going to be mapped in a polar manner around the surface, and so the circumference this way is kind of twice, because this is just the vertical one is just half. The meridian doesn't come back up the other side, so you want it to be twice as wide as it is high, so I'll do that. And so what I'm going to do is, if it's, your color scale goes basically from 0 to 1, and if everything's 0 it's black, everything 1 is white, and what I'm going to do is right in the middle, a medium gray, I'm going to make that represent no wind, like 0, because what I need is to represent both positive and negative values. And so what I'll do is anything greater than 0.5, or if you're doing just normal RGB 0 to 255, anything greater than 128 will be a positive value, anything less will be a negative value. So I'm going to go back to the Essentials workspace. I'm used to this one, so I'll just manually put in that medium gray, and I'm going to fill the whole image with that. And what I'm gonna do is go ahead and export that. I hate how it always puts the dashes in the name. I wonder if there's a way to change how it does the naming. or I can just not put any spaces and that'll do it as well. So I gotta go put it in my project. Textures, earth. Let's call it wind hack. So then I go back to the game. It's gonna load that texture. And then what I'm gonna do is go edit the code. So this is my simulation shader. So what is it? Sampler 2D. Let me double check what the keyword here, because I don't normally use actual textures in a compute shader. I use these things called compute buffers. So they have read write texture 2D. I don't really need it read write, but I need texture 2D. I'm gonna make it what's called a fixed 4 because it's only 8 bits per pixel. Just double check that doesn't cause me harm. Unexpected fixed 4. Okay, I guess it has to be a float 4. Interesting. And if you're just joining the stream, feel free to say hello and yeah, all that stuff. Whoa, hold on, what the heck? Sorry, I'm monitoring the stream in this other computer here. Alright. So what I'm gonna do is, while it's running here, I've got my terrain. It's on the planet simulators where that is, and it's gonna have a shader. I'm gonna need a spot to actually plug in the texture here, because the shader itself isn't like a material. So let me stop this, go to my planet simulator, and where do I want to put it? I'll just put it at the top for now, I guess. Public texture 2D, we'll call it wind hack texture. And simulation shader, let's do some stuff here. So I set all the buffers and stuff, and now I need to say dot set texture. Wind texture. So that should be what I need to pipe everything through. Now the tricky part is I have to compute basically every point I'm processing in this compute shader is a vertex on the surface of this sphere. If I show you in wireframe, right, I've got all these points, and so every one of those is being processed, having a simulation done for it. So I need to go from that to what's called polar coordinates, so then I can look it up in the texture. So and I have some code already written to compute polar coordinates, but what I'm gonna do here is so at this point, enabling the wind code shouldn't do anything because the wind should all be 0. And let me just go ahead and hit play just to verify that. And yeah, why am I looking at the scene? Look, oh, something happened. Oh, because I didn't assign the texture yet, right? So let me put that guy in there. And like I was saying, I have a thing to inspect different values. So if I look at the wind, it's all 0, which is good. You can also look at, for example, air pressure, and I get a value in the corner of the screen, and that actually is varying over the planet, and that seems to more or less be working. Like it'll be higher where there's more mass. You can see the volcanoes will be affecting it, even though they're moving around a lot. And everything's really hot now, so you have really high air pressure. 500 atmospheres worth of air pressure. But once all that it cools off and all that water rains down, then it drops really fast back to something more like what the Earth has. So pretty soon it should get close to about 1 atmosphere of pressure. Thanks, Max. Yeah, I did make a lot of progress. I've been working long days and into the night a little bit too much. But I need to find a little bit more of a balance. But I think if there's a time to crunch, it's right now, because I'm planning on going to PAX to go pitch to publishers. So I need to have good video, good pitch, and maybe even a playable demo. Have I figured out some gameplay elements, or still just doing visuals and simulation? That's a good question. So there aren't going to be, I'm calling it an interactive idle game, which means it's mostly meant to, like, you've set it up in the beginning. You can put some land in here, terraform it, set like what's the axis tilt, how fast does the planet rotate, what's its orbit distance, stuff like that. And maybe some other random things like what material is the planet made of. And then you let it simulate. And if you want, you can play with it, do some terraforming. If not, you don't have to. And the planet is going to have emotions and like little messages depending on what's happening and what's the character of that particular planet. And so those hints might actually, or those things to say might just be like funny little things, or they might contain hints about maybe something you should do. Like, oh, I have indigestion, and maybe you can do something to like make it with, like, it's got too many volcanoes, so you need to chill out with the volcanoes. Or I'm feeling chilly, and you need to figure out something you can do to make the planet a little warmer. But mostly, if you look up mountaingame.com, it's meant to be in a similar vein to that. More interactive than Mountain, because with Mountain, the only interaction is really 2 things. You can move the camera around, and on the keyboard you can play musical notes, which was surprisingly fun because it makes them always on key. So no matter what you hit, it kind of sounds good. But that's really it with Mountain. It's more an observation thing than, quote unquote, a game. And so I want to make something more interactive than that, but not quite like what you'd expect from a standard game. So right, if we go look at our wind, it should still all be 0, which is good. So now I want to go ahead and use that texture that I put into the compute shader that I'm doing all my simulation in. So my wind code is running, and so what I'm gonna do, my wind velocity is, I'm doing this thing that's supposed to reconstruct a sort of compressed value that's stored in like local polar coordinates into like a global XYZ. But I'm gonna undo that, and what I'm gonna, instead of using this value, actually I still probably want that is I'm gonna take the value from a texture. So I'm gonna be like float2 wind text val equals, I haven't read textures in Computer Shader yet, so I'm assuming this is how you do it, but I'm not entirely certain. And I need polar stuff. So somewhere I have it in this cloud layer shader, but what I'm going to do is bring that into an include file so I can use it somewhere else. And physics or planet? I guess planet. CG Inc. is what I'm calling that file. was 0, which at the moment is going to mean 0 wind. So make sure I sanity check. I like to do that often just to make sure I didn't mess anything up. Things seem okay. Everything compiled. And once that's done, then now actually I'm going to use the value in the texture. And what did I call it? I called it wind texture. I don't have polar coordinates yet, so I need to compute them. Equals this guy. So I have this function I wrote that converts from XYZ Cartesian coordinates to polar coordinates. And actually surface position should already be normalized, so I shouldn't need to normalize it because my whole mesh has a radius of 1, and like the height differences are actually not stored there but in a separate compute buffer right here that I highlighted, the value that we get from that. And so right now, text 2D doesn't work. Okay, looks like I might have to access it as an array. Reading texture in compute shader. It's weird because I normally just strictly use compute buffers in compute shaders, so this is my first time using a texture. So let me just, sorry, I have to quickly look up the documentation for this. I can also do Unity texture compute shader. Input texture ID. So yeah, it looks like I just access it at integer coordinates, and I do it using this syntax, just an erase kind of syntax. And for the testing purposes, I'm just going to quickly say access the 0th texel. Okay, and all is good in texel land. And so I know as a quick hack, I know the resolution of my polar chords. But I need to, the polar coordinates are in radians, so I need to convert those to a 0 to 1 value. Polar chords divided by 3.14159 is pi for times 2 actually, and times 1 for the y, because like I said, when you if you look at a map of the Earth, right, it's wider than it's tall, just because of the way they map coordinates, where you have it going all the way around this way, but you only go from top to bottom once. So we have float 2. And then, so that gives me a 0 to 1 value. And then, once I have that, I need to polar chords, or I should call it UV, and polar texel ID, and that's an int 2, it's 2-dimensional, equals int 2. Colors times 2, and it's 124 wide, but because of the way you do addressing, you subtract 1, and then 512 tall. And this might be upside down, but that's okay, it doesn't really matter, it's a quick hack anyway. Multiply, just in case there's any like rounding error, I'm going to do that. And let me double check that this polar coordinates thing gives positive values, because that would be a problem if it doesn't. A tan 2. So what does A tan 2 return? Return negative pi to pi. Okay. So, and then the y looks like it's gonna be positive, but the x need, or no, yeah, the y is positive, and then the x, yeah, okay, I made them all positive, okay. So the wind text value equals that. Instead of 0, I'm going to use polar textile ID. So far everything's compiling, so that's a good sign. My air velocity is not 0 because I didn't do the adjustment. So let me just cancel that out for a second. Equals wind text val times 2 minus 1. Because that remaps from 0 to 1 to negative 1 to plus 1. And yep, okay. I don't know why it says it has any magnitude at all. I don't think that would be a texture filtering issue, but maybe. But then if I go ahead as a test and I fill it with red in like half the planet, then like the wind will be going to the, presumably to the east. For that half of the planet. So it looks like it's going east and then west there for some reason. Something's still strange. So what I'm gonna do is say, I'm gonna, as a debugging test, I'm gonna take my first the polar coordinates, and then output those to the screen. So I have to pipe them through a couple places. I'm going to enable my debug output here, and what I'm going to do is say that the color equals in.surface properties 2.w, because remember I just kind of stuffed this x component of the polar coordinates in this surface properties 2.w, which is this when it makes it further down the pipeline. So then I should see that. And that looks right. 0 to 1. Okay. And this should go 0 to 1 from top to bottom. And that looks right too. So now the next thing is my polar textile ID. And that should go between 0 and 1023. And that looks a lot like what I saw before, if I remember correctly. And then the Y 511. Wait. Did I? Oh, maybe I didn't see. Okay, there we go. Okay, so that all looks good. So then the next is look at what I actually got out of the texture. Where am I looking? So I'm gonna scroll back to where I'm just kind of piping through that value, and it's really cool to just be able to look over the surface of the planet and see everything that is going on at a glance. Where did I put that? Right here. So this should be red or white for half the planet with a kind of a vertical slice going through it, dividing it. And that's what I see here. So that, oh, just to make sure it is 1 and not like some crazy high value. Yeah, okay, so multiplying, and so now the y should all be zeros. Huh. That's interesting that the y's are not all zeros. Seems like it was negative in some places. Yeah, somehow I'm getting a negative value there. Oh, because I already did this thing. So that's my wind texture value. Straight out of the texture. Straight out of Compton. So yeah, this is 0.5 and this is 1, just like I set it up in Photoshop. It'll be 0.5 here and 1 here. Oh, and actually, since I painted over, I erased the, oh yeah, I should have done an add instead. So I'm going to do a new layer, now do it, and then make it an additive layer, which is called, what the hell, they have subtract, where is it? In Photoshop, I don't know what an additive layer would actually be. Overlay maybe? Let's see what the color is. Now overlay is something else, but it might just work. That's really annoying. It's weird they have subtract here but not add. That's the most bizarre thing. What am I missing? Maybe lighten? Maybe some of these forms are like, oh, it's actually this, just called this thing. And then let me push that down, and then what is this color value? Okay, that's what I want. The lighten seems to work. I don't know if it just takes sort of the max of the two or if it adds it, but either way, it gives me what I want. Okay, so I'm looking at the X, so the Y should all be 0.5. Good, 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 good. Okay. So now, oh, that's why it was getting weird, getting funky. What did I do? Oh. I wonder if I have a problem with my reconstruction of the wind 3D value. It shouldn't be changing directions like that. So where is my... So I have this thing that basically what it does is, if you know any mathy stuff, you have like, at any point on a surface in 3D you have like two vectors that define the surface of it. They're called the tangent and the bitangent, and they're perpendicular to each other. So I take those local x and y values and I multiply them by each of those to get the actual 3D direction, as you can see here. So the one question is there a problem with this get local polar tangent and bitangent function, which calculates those based on where you are on the sphere? So, but I'm pretty sure, well, I have like this reconstruct happening on the CPU as well, and every, like, my assertions and things there seem to be okay. But let me go ahead and just output this guy here. Where does he live? Okay. So I'm gonna just to check that I'm not going insane or stupid. I'm going to just pipe these values through to look at them on the screen to make sure that they're okay. And with that, I'll do tangent.x. So everywhere on the globe, the tangent.x should basically be positive for half the globe and negative for the other globes. It kind of wraps around. And that kind of looks right. So this must be the positive x direction. And we can take a sneak peek by looking in the editor view here and looking at the object. And is that, it doesn't quite seem right. It seems kind of off for 45 degrees. So basically it should be at the maximum value right here, because like a point kind of just barely grazing the surface would point in the red x direction. So I think something's wrong with my math here. Okay. So this we don't really care about because this is like right at the poles, like sort of an edge condition. But we care about this. So this is like, the point can be any, I hate how that happens. Let me turn off the rotation, just so it doesn't mess with me at all as I'm looking at this stuff. So, anywhere on the planet, like you can be kind of up close or you can be right at the equator, and basically what I want to do is like wherever you are on the planet, get that value and normalize it to a unit length, just that, but without the vertical component, so it kind of looks like you're on the equator. And once you're on the equator, there's sort of like a simple 2D math you can do to get, basically you have a vector going out from the surface and then one going tangent, and they're perpendicular to each other, 90 degrees. So this is supposed to be the simple math that you can do to kind of do that conversion in 2D. Similar to, if you know 3D math, the cross product, but this is the simpler 2D version of it. And that seems like it should work. So I'm a little bit confused. What I'm actually going to do is output a different value, which is surface position.x. So it should increase in the direction of this red arrow. And it's not. Oh crap, because I have global arrows on. Oh. In the Unity editor, like the widgets that you see can be either local or global, and I'm so used to them being local. Thanks for popping in, Justin. Hopefully I get to show you something pretty cool with some wind here in a second, and just kind of working through the math of it. Okay, that makes more sense. That makes perfect sense. And just to check the backside, because I always like to look at the backside. It's doing what I want there. So now the Y, as you should start off with at the very pole being 0, and like when you're at the equator, your kind of grazing angle is at maximum downwardness. So that'd be actually a negative 1 in the Y, and then it goes back to 0 as you get down toward the bottom. So let's see. And the Y component doesn't seem to be working, so that could be part of my problem. So the meridian. So basically, I take what I'm doing here with the X and the Z. So you can see these three axes. X is the red, Z is the blue, and Y is the green. So X, Y, Z in this order: red, green, blue. I want to get what's called the meridian, where I take basically a slice straight downwards, straight through the middle of the planet. Think about that. And so I take the X and Z, that's the two like horizontal components, and I normalize that to basically give me a point around the equator. And so I want to take a slice that goes like through that point on the equator and through that central axis that the planet spins around. In that position, since it's a sphere, that's also like the position is in the same direction as the vector pointing out directly from the surface of the sphere. And then the bitangent is gonna be, it's gonna have a Y component coming downward that is basically the closer you are to the equator, the bigger it will be. And that seems right. And then the position at Y will go from +1 to -1. So basically give it a fraction of that equator value, that vector pointing outward. And position at Y, so 1 times that meridian. Yeah, so at the very pole, you're going to get the maximum sort of horizontality. You know, it's the most horizontal at the poles. And then when you get to the equator, it goes to 0. So that seems like it should work. So this is kind of making some, wait. Yes, it makes sense that tangent.x, I'm looking at the bitangent turn. I should look at the tangent, because that was what the problem was, right? Yeah, wait, that makes sense that it's 0, because all the tangents are just going this way in the east direction, basically, around the globe. So I was just thinking about that wrong, so now let's verify this one. Bitangent.x, so it should be increased, yeah, closest at the pole, or greatest value, and then go down to 0. And then is this coming back around this way? Do I want that? I wonder if that's a problem. So I want it to go over here. I kind of want it to go, oh yeah, that's coming down this way in the positive X direction. And if I make it negative, or that is already negative, but if I flop it, then it should get a diagonal swap here. Except, yeah, because I want it to be the vector that's sort of pointing up north. So here, as we're going north along this curve here, you're actually kind of moving in the direction of that red arrow, which is the x-axis. So that makes sense. And then the bitangent.y should basically always be a positive value, but it should be or non-negative value, and it should be greatest around the equator. That's what it looks like. I think is that doesn't get quite as dark as I expected down there. So let me just greater than. So 0.707 is actually a cosine of 45 degrees. So we should see like an even split between of like a 45 degree diagonal angle where it's either white or black. I guess that's 45 degrees. It's kind of hard to tell. And if I make it negative, it should never be negative, so that should be all dark. Huh. That's not what I expected. Yes. This has to be a non-negative zero value. So it has to be. There's no negative involved in the y component. So, oh, it's positive still. Thought I put a negative, but I put a 0. Okay, good. That all seems okay. Okay. So now I confirmed that this tangent space stuff is correct. Which now that I think about it, I've already looked at that before another day. But, so now the wind text val dot x will be good. Or actually the wind velocity. Let's take a look at the. So this is a 3D wind velocity. So in half the planet, it should sort of be blowing in the east direction. And that's more than half the planet. So that's a weird thing right there. I'm not sure what this curve is. Like what this weird yin-yang shape is. Just to double check, so if I put it what am I oh, I also disabled some of my. So what am I outputting? Am I not outputting what I think I'm outputting? So, okay, so that makes sense. Oh, because the reconstruct is gonna do some weird stuff, I guess. As a test, let me just put in a pure easterly direction. So that makes sense. So let me go to my texture here, and I'm just gonna fill the whole thing with east. I should get the same thing. But there's a shift. Why is there a shift? texture, right, every point on the thing is 1, 0, 0, so it should only have an X and it should be 1, so it should look exactly like this. I'm reading just the first value in it, always. So I should be getting exactly the same thing as this, and that does shift it, even though, oh, because of the, I'm not considering the Z part. Yeah, that makes sense. So that would give everything a negative Y. So that makes sense. And if I make it glowing west, that looks like a different gradient for some reason. Oh, because I have to do. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, now if I have it just glowing north, is this what I expect for a northerly wind? So let me look here. Let's look at these widgets. It often helps me figure out what's going on here. So this should be, oh, I did it again. It should be 0.5 there. Okay. And that, yeah, so as you go north here, you're kind of moving in the direction of the red arrow, and as you move north here, you're kind of, so that makes sense, which you've already looked at. So maybe south, it should go be the other thing, yeah. So that's all looking good. It looks a bit brighter when I do it this way, but I think that's just because of, let me turn off this light. Still really bright. So, negative, oh, because that's not possible, it's a 0, that's why. Okay, I keep mixing up whether I'm looking at the value in the texture or the plus minus one value that I'm converting it to. Okay. So where is my terrain? So yeah, we're going down. So that all seems hunky-dory. So there's my wind velocity. So if I check that guy out, I use it a couple places. Oh, and I'm not doing the compression here. That's my problem. That could be everything, really. Oh my god. So like, you know, the velocity has X, Y, and Z. It has 3 numbers, but I was kind of like, well, I don't want to add another compute buffer, which maybe I should have just gone ahead and done it for simplicity's sake. I sort of did what's called compressing it, kind of storing the data in 2 numbers instead of 3, because I also know where I am on the surface, so I can kind of reduce the amount of data that I have to store, and compress surface velocity. And I have equivalent versions of these on the CPU, and they seem to be working correctly, so that's a good sign. And I'm looking at the x component of the velocity. How did I get this shape? So I have, it should be, let me go back to something that should be blowing due east everywhere. Look at it in this view here, you can see that as it's blowing around this way, it's positive, so that makes sense. So this one should be blowing south. Oh, I guess I was just looking at I was rotated diagonally and it threw me off in this view. I was looking at it that way when I should have been more like that. I need to do some work on the camera here. Like, it's pretty smooth to drag where you want, but the problem with that is you get sort of these rotations around the camera, what we'd call roll rotation. Like how like a airplane might roll like this. And so like you end up losing what your orientation of the planet is. So either I need to do something to fix the camera or like put like a North Pole flag or something. Okay, so now if I do my actually reading the value, which it should be, what I should make this is actually not do red, but I should make 255 for the green, or 128, and the blue we're not even using, so is that right? You just like an orangey value, yeah. So we have to always like do stuff step by step just to make sure you're not doing anything crazy along the way. Although sometimes like when you're verifying intermediate steps, like you mess up, like you're thinking about how you're checking it and it's actually right, but it takes you a while to realize it. So if I remove this, we should get all easterly winds. Yeah, we do. Sweet. Okay. Man, now that I realized I wasn't doing the compression correctly, I wonder if that's what was screwing up everything in the first place. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and check that. And how I'm gonna do that is I'm gonna get my Pepsi planet, and what I'm gonna do is, so the winds are generated by differences in air pressure, and I'm gonna make the planet look red where the air pressure is higher and blue where it's lower. So if I go back to the thing that I actually used to draw it, my pixel shader here, I should have some stuff for that already that I've just kind of disabled here. That's what the white's green is disabled. So yeah. Okay, so we can see our areas of low and high pressure, and white is like pretty close to average pressure. And if I bring up my handy tool, I can look at air pressure just to verify that it is. So like average air pressure on Earth, or not on Earth, on this planet is 10.3. So you can see in the red areas it's like 11, in the blue it's got like 7. So I have some quite extreme air pressure differences. So what I'm gonna do here, actually, is stop using that texture for a second and use like the actual values that are supposed to be running through the simulation. And you can see the pressure starting to sort of push stuff around. The blue is expanding, which I'm trying to think about why the blue would expand. I would expect more just sort of things going more toward white. Oh, and I have wind going. Let me turn off wind. Wind is gonna screw everything up. Do just air pressure. And as a test, first I want to set my wind to 0. Just to kind of set everything back to, okay. That looked actually, it's like you would expect the high pressure areas to expand until they kind of fade out to white. Like high pressure kind of pushes out, but then as it's pushing out, it reduces in pressure. So now that I kind of cleared out all the wind from my simulation, I want to take that line of code out because I don't want to keep doing that. And you can see it is pushing out. We should start. Ooh, that was some interesting stuff. We should get bigger, like more in between colors as this happens. Seems like there are more areas of high pressure, which means either because the low pressure is so low that like if you do a weighted average, it should still all balance out. Let's see what happens here. Or maybe I just have a problem with my simulation. That's also possible. Or maybe it's just pressure is moving to the other side of the globe. So that's really interesting just to watch that. So now what I want to do is I want to look at the wind. And I'm going to use that little arrow thingy that I made where I'm going to come here and say, show me the wind. And yeah, it still doesn't look right. So what I'm actually going to do now, so like I have wind and like that wind persists from frame to frame, and I'm going to come in here and say every frame the wind is 0. So any wind I see should be just the result of that calculation in this frame. So that I know, I can kind of separate, like, is it a problem because of the calculation or something with like the packing, unpacking from frame to frame? So this is starting actually to look pretty good. You can see it's like blowing from the red to the blue. Like when I'm in the red area, I don't know it's higher or lower, but it's easy to see like at this interface I should always be blowing from the red to either the white or blue. So that's actually really encouraging. 'Cause I felt for a while like I was taking crazy pills. So gosh, that is like a huge relief actually. So it seems like I still have some problem with the packing, like the compressing and decompressing of my wind, which I shouldn't. In the first place, I shouldn't have done that. I should have just bit the bullet and made an extra compute buffer for my wind. Actually, here's the interesting thing is, so I am compressing it. And that's what I'm looking at. So it seems like maybe there's a problem with the decompression. I don't know. But, okay, so I'm gonna go back to just using that texture for now as a quick hack while I investigate this further in the future. So remember, this was all east tech wind. And I don't know what's up exactly. So I'm going to draw like a mountain here. And okay, that's, yeah, I'm kind of upside down. So I'm going to start over just so I know what's up. And also maybe turn off my Okay, there's my effective North Pole. Although, I'm getting stuff that's pointing toward it, which is weird. Like, this is... I don't know where things are pointing. Right, so if I look at this, everything should be blowing east. Let me get rid of my stupid pressure visualization, because that's annoying me. So it might be a little harder to see the arrow now, but this tall peak is not actually my North Pole. So let me do it one more time. Doom World, ha! Okay, let's see. Okay, so that's not exactly the North Pole. Maybe like right here. Not even that. It's kind of in between these lava pools, if I can kind of visually identify them. Okay, I see them. So I think I'm gonna get rid of this stuff. Put something like right here. And that looks like it's pretty much on point. Okay, so as I move my arrow around here, everything should be blowing eastward. Let me turn off the atmosphere just because it's getting in my way of seeing. So that's pretty good. You know, it gets kind of crazy at the pole, but like... Oh, what was that? Oh, my calculations are affecting the wind there, so like if I turn off, something's affecting the wind velocity. I still have air pressure stuff going on. So if I just kind of disable that for the moment, yeah, everything's just going eastward. So now it seems like I'm ready to start painting. So remember what I wanted to do. Thanks, man. I'm glad you think it's looking gorgeous. Feels really good. If we look at trade winds again, or how trade winds work. How trade winds led to battle, that's funny. To get something like this going, so it's going to be going, so it's kind of based on the Coriolis effect, where if something's flowing north, it's also, like from the equator, it's also going to be flowing east, and if it's flowing south from the equator, it's also going to be blowing southeast, so you get like northeast and southeast, and then you get from here you get northwest, and from here you get southwest. So what I'm going to do is try to like paint some of these things, and how I'm going to do that is, let me think about this. So if I come here, I'm going to put some guides. So this is 7.11 inches. I don't know why it's that, but like I wish I could. Okay, that's right in the middle, so that's their equator. And I'm going to not do like 6 zones. I'm going to try just 4 to make it simple. So in these areas, and I'm going to, I don't know, maybe do also 4 divisions across the longitude. And those aren't perfectly even, but it doesn't really matter. So as wind flows north, it's also, from the equator, it's also going to flow east. So to represent that, I need a color that's got both red and green. Actually, first thing I'm going to go through, I'm going to make everything zeros. I'm going to leave the blue out of it. Or actually, maybe it's easier to see how it looks if I just leave it in for my own visual preferences. Like, so like gray is like neutral, and I know that means 0, as opposed to yellow, or like a dull yellow or orange otherwise. Okay, so now I have that. So I'm going to do some loops here. So I'm going to be going like up and to the right here with a brush that's kind of yellow. Where's my paintbrush? It's a pencil, and give me the brush. Well, that's a way too big of a brush. And I want to make it a little softer too. So the wind should all be, and then I'm going to make it a little more northy here. So I'm going to reduce the, I want to make it where there's no more horizontal component for a bit. I want to reduce the opacity that I paint things with, and then I want to kind of go back to the west. Just want to make the red really low, and I totally messed that up. I wanted to get rid of the X component, not the Y component. I know there's some cool tools where you can just kind of like push and it will compute all these values for me, but I don't have one of those tools. At least I don't know where it would be. So, and now I want to go back with the red. And I'm going to do one of these, and then I'm just going to sort of repeat it around all my little tiles here. And it doesn't really matter which way I actually physically stroke it. It's just what color values I'm laying down. And red's gonna go back to 0, and green's gonna be going downward. Red's going to be going positive again, so like 200 maybe. So it's not perfect, but physical stroking sounds very planetary and sciencey. It could also sound like something else. I'm just going to copy this and paste it around. This is by no means great wind. Look, I don't even have my cells set up equally. Except I should only be doing this in the upper atmosphere, because in the lower atmosphere I kind of have to reverse everything. Let me think about that. So here I'm going to the right. Here I'm also going to the right as I go down. So I need to basically invert the Y values, but keep the same X values. I wish I had a way to I knew how to. Oh, I can do a sub. I should have done separate layers for the X and the Y. That would have made this easier. But I'll just go ahead and paint something again. So. What I want is to go down and to the right. Vert flip. How do you know about vertex flipping? And it's gonna go back down, and green's gonna go to 0. And these are gonna be like really bad trade winds, but it should at least be good enough to have something going on the planet. And maybe I should have even done fewer zones, like just 4 of them would have made a lot more sense. But whatever. So now I'm going down, and I'm going back to the left. Now I'm going left. Going a little more up. Actually, painted that wrong. Should be more of this color. Red is 30 and green is like 160, I don't know, something like that. And I'm gonna have this dead zone in the middle. That'll be interesting to see how that turns out. Okay, now red is 128. Green is like 255. And then, okay, I went over my border a little bit, but that's okay. What the heck? I don't know if this will work. I don't know how much it really even matters, to be honest with you. So let's see how this works when I shove it in the program. Look at that lava. Oh, I'm really happy with how that turned out. It was a little bit of just luck and tweaking, where I got like this dry rock texture, and then I just tried plugging it in. But I also liked the like liquidy look of the how I used the old texture for it, so I actually combined both of them, and they have like different amounts of effect depending on how hot the lava is. I wish I had a more state of like, is the lava currently cooling off or not, because it kind of comes in cracked, and then when it gets hot it gets more liquidy and then goes back out cracked. But in real life the lava wouldn't really come. I guess it could come in cracked, maybe I'm wrong, because I have seen surfaces like photos of calderas where you see that kind of look, where it's like semi-molten and there are cracks developing where it's hotter. That's right, my wind, did I not update the texture? Or maybe I need to increase the strength of it? So on my planet, I I have that texture, that wind hack texture. And, okay, there it is. Okay. Where's it? Do I have my North Pole still? What is my North Pole? Okay. Looks like this green island is more or less. Look at that bubbling. Okay. I don't see anywhere where it's going. Oh, there we go. So, let's see. And I guess I could live with just wind always flowing. Oh, interesting. Where is it flowing? Yeah, it's just always going east. For the most part. Why is that? Did I not use the... Do I still have some debug code? Or, oh, I'm using the first texel, that's why. Okay, now I should get some sort of wind vortices, I think. I guess it doesn't really matter. It could pretty much be random as long as I get some wind flow. And it's somewhat, there's some, you know, type of consistency to it. Looks like I have a little loop here. I'm just gonna grow this guy. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is like actually apply the wind. So I'm gonna disable and re-enable this code now. Notice that I'm not actually adjusting the wind, so it should just be still using from the texture. And that's ice. And what I want to see is like moisture moving around, if I have any moisture in the air. Oh, and it would help to actually have my atmosphere turned on, wouldn't it? The tricky part is I have this texture animating that's kind of messing with me because it's not really based on the wind direction. So, what I'm gonna do is go to my clouds and I'm gonna stop using the noise. So I should see this blowing over the land, which looks like it's actually happening, because most of your evaporation is going to happen from the ocean, and you can see this. Well, it's kind of going. That's the opposite direction of the wind, because it might be based on the pressure stuff. But I have all that blowing around, and where the clouds are. Is basically where it's raining, so I should see some changes in like the rain on the land and the air above the land. So it looks like there's a little more land water below this cloud, but then it seems to dry up and evaporate until this volcano comes in again and says, "Ha!" And then that rains, you can see there's a lot of water, like it's actually kind of underwater a little bit now. It rains so much. Like if I turn off the clouds for a second, yeah, you can see all this water came in from the rain. And kind of cover that island. Oh, it's all dry and scorched over here. And the idea is, I want to have like basically rain coming in over the land, and then the rate at which it rains is going to be based on like if it has to hit any mountain ranges or anything. Because if moist air hits mountain ranges and it has to go up in the air and then it cools, then it starts raining, and that's why like Seattle and Oregon are really wet. So that's kind of, and thinking about that was a lot of the inspiration for making this game in the first place. It looks like I have some code in here to account for that, but I haven't really been able to test it yet. But here is the planet. And I think that'll be it for this stream. Thanks for coming along with me, guys. It really actually means a lot that you guys are here and taking an interest. And I'll wait a few seconds before I go off the stream in case you want to say anything in the chat. But otherwise, it's been good, and I'm gonna get back to like working on my pitch materials. Which, if you're friends with me on Facebook, I made a post with some of that that I'm looking for feedback on. It's oriented toward publishers. Yeah. Thanks, Tony. I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming. With my ball. Alright. It's been fun. If you just joined the stream, I'm unfortunately logging off, but maybe you can skip around in the VOD to see some of the progress on the planet, and toward the end we'll actually get some semblance of wind going. And then see you next time tomorrow.